Have you ever opened a can of corned beef and thought, wait a minute, where's the corn? There's beef, there's salt, there's that familiar rectangular tin, but not a single yellow kernel in sight. And yet somehow, we've all accepted the name without questioning it too much. So why is it called corned beef if there's no corn in it? The answer takes us back hundreds of years, to a time before refrigerators, before freezers, before electricity, when keeping meat from rotting was a daily struggle. Back then, preserving food wasn't about convenience, it was about survival. One of the most powerful tools people had was salt. Salt draws moisture out of meat, and without moisture, bacteria can't grow. That simple chemical reaction meant the difference between eating and starving during long winters or long voyages at sea. But here's where it gets interesting. The word corn didn't always mean maize, the yellow vegetable we think of today. In older English, corn simply meant a small, hard grain or particle. It could refer to grains of wheat. It could refer to barley, and it could also refer to large, coarse grains of salt. Those chunky crystals of salt used to preserve beef were called corns of salt. So when beef was cured using those large salt grains, it became known as corned beef, not beef with corn. Beef cured with salt grains. That's it. A name frozen in time. And that simple preservation method turned out to be incredibly important. By the 17th century, salted beef had become a major industry, especially in places like Ireland and England. Ireland, in particular, became famous for producing high-quality salted beef that was exported across Europe and even to the Americas. Ironically, most Irish people at the time couldn't even afford to eat it themselves. The beef was largely produced for export. Locals often relied more on pork and vegetables for their daily meals, but corned beef was durable. It lasted. It could survive months at sea, and that made it valuable. During the age of exploration, ships needed food that wouldn't spoil halfway across the ocean. Fresh meat was impossible to store for long journeys. Salted meat, including corned beef, became essential for sailors crossing the Atlantic. In fact, navies relied heavily on salted beef and pork. It fueled trade routes, exploration, and military campaigns. Without preserved meats like corned beef, global expansion might have looked very different. Later, during the 18th and 19th centuries, corned beef continued spreading across the world. Then came a major shift. In the 19th century, millions of Irish immigrants moved to the United States. In America, beef was more affordable than it had been back home. Jewish butchers in cities like New York were already producing their own brined beef products. The flavors were familiar, the techniques were similar. And over time, corned beef and cabbage became a signature dish among Irish Americans, especially around St. Patrick's Day. Interestingly, this meal is often considered traditionally Irish today. But in Ireland itself, bacon and cabbage were historically more common. In many ways, corned beef and cabbage is an Irish-American creation, a product of immigration, adaptation, and cultural blending. Meanwhile, the canned version of corned beef began to rise in popularity. Canning technology in the 19th century allowed meat to be cooked, pressed, sealed, and stored for long periods. The now iconic rectangular tin wasn't random. Its shape made it easier to stack, ship, and pack efficiently. During both World Wars, canned corned beef became a standard ration for soldiers. It didn't require refrigeration. It didn't require elaborate cooking. It could survive extreme conditions. What started as a preservation method had turned into a logistical powerhouse. And from there, corned beef traveled even further. In the Caribbean, it became known as bully beef, often cooked with rice or vegetables. In the Philippines, corned beef became a breakfast favorite, sautéed with onions and served with garlic rice and eggs. In Latin America, it appears in sandwiches and empanadas. In Hong Kong, it's mixed into macaroni soups served at breakfast cafes. Each culture took this simple preserved meat and reshaped it into something uniquely their own. Today, corned beef can mean slightly different things depending on where you are. In the United States, it often refers to a brined beef brisket, pink, tender, sliced, and served warm with cabbage. In many other countries, it refers to the canned version, shredded, salty, tightly packed into metal tins. Different textures, different preparations, same origin. Both trace their name back to those coarse grains of salt, the corns, that preserved the meat centuries ago. Over time, language changed. The word corn gradually became associated specifically with maize. The older meaning faded away, but the name corned beef stayed. It became a kind of linguistic fossil, a word that preserves history just as effectively as salt preserves meat. So the next time you look at a can of corned beef and wonder where the corn is, you'll know. It was never about vegetables, it was about survival, about sailors crossing oceans, about immigrants building new lives, about soldiers in distant lands, about a simple preservation technique that quietly shaped global cuisine. Sometimes the most confusing food names carry the richest stories, and sometimes all it takes is a few grains of salt to change history.